So a question has arisen. Is it better to do a fluid exchange or a pan drop and the fluid? Now, there are many speculations as to why one would be better than the other. In my personal opinion, if you've always kept up on your maintenance, let's say a filter change every 60,000 miles would be sufficient. If you've always kept up on your maintenance and your transmission fluid still has a good color, it doesn't smell burnt or anything like that, a fluid exchange in between those filter changes would be sufficient. So what I personally do is about 25,000 miles ago, maybe a little bit less, I did a pan drop, which is about 5 quarts of fluid, and I changed the filter. The filter didn't have any abnormal debris or anything in it. The fluid was still actually pretty clean to begin with, and I replaced the fluid in the filter. 25,000 miles later, about is where we're at now, my 30,000 mile close to interval. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to do a fluid exchange. I have a machine that you can either hook up 2 lines and you can push it through the actual transmission, or you can run it down the dipstick, and as the transmission is run, it'll pull everything out of the pan, suck it completely dry, and then it'll exchange whatever it sucked out with fresh fluid. And then it will say, go start the vehicle to get the pump running, right? And then it'll start pumping that fresh fluid into the torque converter throughout the transmission, and it will actually exchange new fluid as it's doing it, 1 quart at a time. So is it a true pushing all the fluid out, every single bit of it? No. Is it more sufficient than just a pan drop? Yes, because as it sucks everything out, it puts what it took out back in, and then it says start the vehicle. And as the transmission, everything's moving, the pump's pumping fluid, it will exchange what it pulls out while it's running. So it takes a level beyond just a pan drop and actually flushes it. Now we could go even further and drain the torque converter. Is that always necessary? It's not necessary. The reason it's not necessary is if somebody keeps up on their maintenance intervals, they never have chemical breakdown. They don't have to worry about damaging the transmission. Where the failure comes into play is if you have a severely worn transmission, it's very, very dirty fluid and kind of gritty and it smells, chances are that transmission is not very healthy. You take brand new transmission fluid, you flush out that transmission completely, you wash all that dirt and grit and everything else is still helping hold that transmission together, that's helping those clutch packs apply with the grit and stuff that's in the fluid, you're gonna end up causing misshifts, not necessarily misshift, delayed shifts. It could be hard shifts. It could be a number of things. You can dislodge debris inside the transmission that's already packed away in crevices and stuff like that, or maybe that's caked away inside the torque converter and end up in the valve body. So that's why a lot of people say on a transmission that's old, it's dirty, it smells burned and stuff like that, you putting all that fresh fluid inside there, it's going to dislodge some things. It could possibly end up creating a bigger problem and then potentially end up leading to your torque converter, or not your torque converter, your transmission having to be rebuilt, going out, whatever you will. Now, a personal story of mine is I think it was a 92 Z71 Cavalier. I was like 18, 19 years old. I didn't know any better. And I'd been working on cars since I'd been about 15, but I'd never really got into transmission stuff. Now, this Cavalier was pretty cool back in the day, and it was kind of sporty and stuff, and I liked it. And back then, it looked pretty cool. My buddies and stuff back then thought it was pretty cool because one of my other buddies had a newer version of the Z71, I think it was called, or whatever that version was with the Z something one, and he had the newer version of it. And they're pretty quick little cars for what it was. I think it was like a 3.1 liter Cavalier. It was the V6 version. And it started to slip a little bit when it was shifting. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to flush all the fluid and stuff out of it. I did a complete fluid flush in that car. What a mistake. Within 2 days of driving it, the transmission was completely gone. That was my first lesson in not to completely flush a transmission that, one, I never maintained. I didn't know what the maintenance records were before I bought the vehicle. And number two, it was in pretty bad shape. Looking at the fluid as I was pulling it out, and I got excited thinking now here we are 17 years later, and I've been a master tech in the field for quite some time now, It's just a rule of thumb you don't do. Even our transmission guy that's been doing this for 36 years, whenever something comes in that's like really, really burnt, and it's not in very good condition, he'll tell them like, look, maybe we could replace some of the fluid. Let's do like a basic pan drop. Or maybe we can just remove what's in the pan. So he'll take our transmission machine, and on the newer F-150s, there's a 19 millimeter plug on the side of the transmission, and you pull that plug out, and then there's a little stick about so big, and it's got a level indicator on it. He'll pull what's in the pan out and replace with fresh fluid, but he won't go the full bore cleaning that thing out and everything else, because we've had so many transmissions in the past where we've done a full fluid exchange, and all of a sudden that transmission's garbage after that. Now, if you keep up on regular routine maintenance like I do, 25, 30,000, filter, pan drop, put it back together. Here we are 25, 30,000 miles later, fluid exchange. 25,000, 30,000 miles later, pan drop, filter exchange. I do this interval. So every time I pull my fluid, it's never dirty, it's never garbage, it never smells burnt, it never misses shifts, it doesn't do any of that stuff, there's no delayed shifts, there's no none of that. So I've learned my lesson by doing this in the past. You know, a lot of people have their opinions on things, but when it comes to people that actively work in the field and have experienced this stuff on a plethora of vehicles, it's a fact. Sometimes doing a complete fluid exchange on a vehicle that's not maintained very well could be catastrophic. In a couple days that transmission lasts, a couple months, a year, and then it's gone again. You never know what the situation is or why. But the times where they do go or they malfunction shortly after a complete fluid exchange is it's pretty critical. I like to pull the pan every 30,000 miles because I want to see what's going on. I want to get an idea on if anything's in that filter. Am I getting any metal debris and stuff on the magnet that's inside the oil pan? You know, so there's a number of things that could go wrong with that. So that's my take on everything. I'm not going to beat you guys up about it and give you any more than that. I've said what I've said, and you can take it for what it is. You could look at multiple forums. 90% of the forums out there, guys talk about the experience that I'm telling you right now, and they actually state it as truth. That a lot of transmission sites and stuff will tell you the same thing. People just don't maintain their vehicles like it's an expensive piece of machinery that needs to be maintained and respected, and this is what ends up happening. Now we're going to go out here to my fluid exchange. I'm going to show you a version of a fluid flush where I'm going to put 12 quarts of Mercon LV in my machine. I'm going to run the tube down the dipstick. I am going to go through the process, and I'm going to show you exactly how another version of a flush would be, but it's in between a full-blown flush and a pan drop. A lot of people forget there is something called a dipstick exchange. You don't have to drain the torque converter. You don't have to go as full bore as a complete fluid drop. You can do an in-between, which an in-between is drop the pan or suck what's in the pan completely out, fill it with fresh fluid, start the vehicle, run it. That fresh fluid mixes in with the old fluid, and as the machine is taking a quart out, it's putting a quart of fresh fluid in. So you're not ever truly doing a full-blown flush, but it's the in-between between a pan drop and a full-bore fluid exchange. Let's go do it. Okay, first of all, I am going to pull my trans dipstick here. You can see how red clean that fluid is. Just super, super clean. The man that had this vehicle before me took amazing care of this vehicle. So I would no doubt in my mind, it's like brand new. I mean, there's no debris, no junk, no garbage, no nothing in it, because the old man that had this really, really, really took good care of this vehicle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take my line here. We're going to run it down there nice and easy. You don't have to force it. It'll stop. Okay, there. It doesn't want to go anymore. You're done at that point. Come back over to your machine. Hook your leads up. Machine powers on. Pull your fill cap port. These are all the different lines that you can do full bore flushes with. You can actually hook these up to pressure lines and everything else while the system's on, and you can really clean that system out. I'm showing you the in-between. People mention pan drops and people mention full bore drain drops and all that other. This is the in-between those two. Now I'm going to go over here to my fluid. And it even does, this is their new line where they guarantee it. If anything happens, and it's a direct relation to what chemicals you're putting in there via Valvoline with this, and they say it crosses, they actually will pay for the part of the transmission to be replaced because of the direct relation to their fluid being the cause of the issue. So this replaces, or this is Ford Mercon LV, but it also goes in a plethora of other vehicles as well. This is their new synthetic line called Max Life, and this is what we will be running. I'm going to go ahead and fill this machine up real quick. Let's go over here real quick and look and see what the capacity is on, let's see here, 2006 Town Car, Mercon 5, which we have, LV is compatible with that. It says fluid capacities for all is 12.8 quarts, and then it gives you your specs here. We're interested in capacity, so I put 12 quarts of fluid in the machine, and let's go ahead and actually do the full 12 quart service. And we are going to do a dipstick exchange. So number 2, and it says we have got 14 quarts in the system. It says you can have up to 21 used quarts before you have to drain it, and we're going to do now we're going to start the service. Press start to begin. It says, do you want to do a filter replacement? So what this machine will do is it'll suck out everything that's in the pan, and it'll stop, and then it'll say, okay, raise the vehicle and remove the pan and filter and put everything back together. We're going to do a normal exchange. And it says, do you want to begin, if you want to put like a cleaning additive in there or something like that? No, I don't want no cleaning. So it says turn engine off. Look at the color of that fluid that it's pulling out. It's like brand new. So it'll keep pulling, and it'll tell me how much used it pulls out of the pan. Okay, you can see here it's starting to suck air. So it took out 3.4. Now it's going to put in 3.4 before it tells me to start the vehicle and actually make the pump start running, pushing fluid out and exchanging fluid. Okay, it's telling me now it put out exactly what it pulled out. So now it says start the vehicle. So let's go start the vehicle. Okay, now we continue. It'll always start with 1 extra quart because it never wants to leave the transmission low. And now it will start pulling, and it will keep exchanging 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1 until all 12 quarts are changed. So we're done. We've stopped the machine. Now what we'll do, pull our line back out of the transmission tube, take your dipstick and insert it back in, wipe it off first, pull the dipstick back out with it in idle, trying to get this thing to stop, and it's just below or right at that. The level is right here. Remember, this engine's been running, so it's going to be a little warm. At full operating temperature, it should be right in the middle of the crosshatch. At like room temperature, it'll be somewhere in between the two dots. And when it's at the lower dot, it means it's too low, don't drive until you top off. Anytime you do a fluid exchange, you want to get in the vehicle with it running, shift it through all the gears, and then put it back in park and let it idle. Pull your dipstick out, clean it, put it back in, pull it back out, check your level. You should be in between those two at room temperature or in the crosshatch at operating temperature. Now, let's talk about other transmissions. And this is just for your reference real quick. This is on the Panther platform cars. The vehicle should not be driven if the transmission fluid level indicator shows the transmission fluid is below the do not drive mark. Where's the do not drive mark? Number one, the do not drive mark. If the vehicle has been operated for an extended period of time at highway speeds in city traffic or in hot weather when pulling a trailer, the transmission fluid needs to cool down to obtain accurate reading. This is still fairly cool/warm. The transmission fluid level reading on the transmission fluid level indicator will differ from operating and ambient temperatures. The correct reading should be within normal operating temperature range. Under normal circumstances, the transmission fluid level should be checked during normal maintenance. If the transmission starts to slip, shift slowly, or has signs of transmission fluid leakage, the transmission fluid level should be checked. And then here is with the selector lever in park, engine in idle, foot pressed on the brake, move the selector lever through each gear and allow the engagement of each gear. Place the selector lever back in the park position, wipe the transmission fluid level indicator cap, and remove the transmission fluid level indicator. Wipe the transmission fluid level indicator with a clean cloth. Install the transmission fluid indicator in the transmission fluid filler tube until it is fully seated, then remove the transmission fluid level indicator. The transmission fluid level should be within the normal operating temperature range, which we were. We were right at the edge of that crosshatch because it's not quite up to operating temperature yet. And it says number 2, transmission fluid level at operating temperature. We're fine. Fluid level at room temperature would be more in between those two, which that's kind of where we are at both. So, down here, high transmission fluid level. A transmission fluid level that is too high may cause the transmission fluid to become aerated due to the churning action of the rotating internal parts. This will cause erratic control pressure, foaming, loss of transmission fluid from the vent tube, and possible transmission malfunction and/or damage. Low transmission fluid. A low transmission fluid level indicator could result in poor transmission engagement, slipping, malfunction, and/or damage. This could also indicate a leak in the transmission seals or gasket. Adding transmission fluid. I'll let you read this here. Also here on the bottom. Let's go talk. Earlier I had a customer come in with a 2017 Ford C-Max. It's a hybrid. They don't run as long as normal cars do, but they still have to function. This customer services his transmission every 30,000 miles. The C-Max does not have a filter that can be changed. It's an ECVT transmission, which means you're going to do a drain and fill on it. On the bottom, there's like a 5 Allen that you pull out, and you drain about 4.75 quarts, 4.78 quarts of fluid, Mercon LV. And then you pull a little plug out of the side. Some people say it's an Allen, but most of the time in the newer ones it's not. It's like a 13 millimeter plug. Looks like it's part of a support for the transmission or a housing bolt, but it's really not. It's a fill plug. You put in exactly 4.75. Then you put the vehicle on the ground, you start the vehicle, you run it for about a minute, and you shut it off. recheck your fluid level. I've never had one come up low after replacing 4.75 quarts, 4.78 quarts. It's always been right at the level, right at the hole. It should be even with it. Internal filters and transmissions obviously can't be changed unless they're pulled apart and rebuilt. So they're requiring the person to be on their service intervals. I mean, to the T, if not early. Those transmission, like those filters get plugged. A regular filter in a transmission gets plugged. You starve the pump of fluid. You can burn them up. There's a number of things that can be done. So that's why it's always important to keep up on your maintenance and know what kind of condition your fluid is in when you buy a vehicle. It's one of the most important things that nobody ever checks. So remember, fluid maintenance is very, very important, and some transmissions don't have serviceable filters. They are literally requiring you to stay up on your fluid maintenance. Thank you guys for watching this video. This video was basically enticed by Panzer. If you don't know his channel, I will link his channel down in the comment section as the pinned post, and also I will link it in the description of the video. He's a definite huge asset to the Panther community. I'm just here as one of the technical experts that try to help as many people out as I possibly can, and this is what I do for a living. I happen to love these vehicles. I love the community that we have here, and thank you guys for being a part of it. Thank you for sticking through this video for 21 minutes and listening to me ramble on about transmissions and possibly showing you an in-between, a pan drop and a full fluid flush by drain and torque converter and stuff like that. This is another way to do it that is very sufficient, and it's acceptable to do it, especially if you keep up on your maintenance. Thank you guys.